Hi, I'm Rex Darty. I'm the artistic director of theater programming at Solus Nua, and I'm so thrilled to be joined with Jim Culleton, the artistic director of Fishamble, the new play company in Dublin, Ireland. Jim, hi, thanks for being here.
Hi. Yes, hi Rex. Thank you so much for having me. Delighted to be here and delighted to be able to take part in this kind of, strange new version of a post-show discussion. The
Yeah.
kind of nicer to be in an auditorium or in a foyer of a theatre, but kind of great. We can actually chat about plays and share work with each other around the place. And it's always such a pleasure to collaborate with Solus New. Obviously, having produced Silent last year in DC, and then being a small part of your Cybercrack Festival earlier on. You're doing lots of innovative things during these times. So it's lovely to hook up and to share our tiny plays with your audiences and have a chance to chat about them afterwards. So thanks for that.
Yeah, no, this technology existed before the pandemic, but we weren't using it to connect as cleverly as we could have with artists like yourselves and companies in Ireland. And so, one of the silver linings of the pandemic is how easy it is to connect around the world, and how it showed us like, oh yeah, you can, this technology already exists. Let's get Jim for a discussion. Let's talk about
Yeah,
tiny plays.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. No, there have been some upsides
Right.
amid all
Yeah.
the downsides.
Yeah, we got to focus on the positive.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So yes, we did some tiny plays for Cybercrack back in March, and you were telling me early, because tiny plays is something that Fishamble has done in the past, and it seemed so perfect for this moment. It was ready made for small groups of actors who can be socially distant, short pieces that might not require weeks and weeks of rehearsal. What was the origin of tiny plays back when it first began?
Yeah. Thanks, Rex. So it's a model we have used before. It seems to be a model we turn to in times of crisis a little. Back in 2008, 2009, when the economic collapse happened, excuse me, we had asked people to submit tiny plays to us, I suppose, to express something they felt passionately about, something that they felt strongly about and wanted to share with people. And we kind of hoped then, by putting these tiny plays together, we'd create a kind of a mosaic or a patchwork quilt of thoughts and ideas expressed through theatre, and sharing what the nation is thinking of and what the nation is going through. So we've returned to that model during the pandemic. At first, it was just a way of trying to help engage with our audiences and our followers and keep people creative and thinking creatively. So we just put up a different prompt word each week, like change or essential, or words that seem to be kind of in the air and beyond people's minds during the
Right.
lockdown. And we did it just as a kind of a creative writing exercise. And we chose some of those plays that we got submitted to us and shared them online on our website. And then I suppose we thought then after a while that the plays were so good and so powerful, and we were getting so much great feedback about how they were really capturing what was on people's minds in a really vivid way, that we thought we would actually see, could we put together a kind of an online production of a selection of just 10 of the roughly 500 plays that we received.
Wow. Yeah. That strikes me as it's so interesting, the submission that you did, and in a lot of ways, because you read 500 plays, short plays from artists that are responding to this moment, it's like you had an ear to the ground, a finger on the pulse of just what people are feeling in a large sample. And I'm just curious, was there an overwhelming theme or something that really like came through as like, oh wow, people are really focused on this right now?
Yeah, it felt like a
Yeah.
real privilege, I think, actually. You felt like, gosh, we are very privileged to be reading these plays, and for people to be sharing kind of quite intimate personal thoughts about what they're thinking about. So we kind of felt we were privy to a real glimpse of what was on people's minds.
Mm.
And certainly some themes did come up repeatedly. I think there were a lot of plays about being kind of locked in, like being isolated and quarantined. And and I suppose there weren't many plays about people who were happy with their families, because that didn't make for a very dramatic situation. But lots of plays where people were sort of weighing up where they were quarantining, what where their home was when you were told to stay at home. What did that mean? So lots of plays where people choosing, do they stay with a partner? Do they return to their parents' home? Do they stay in a rented apartment, even if it's in a place where they are for work and they've lost their job? And all those kinds of issues came up. So we had a couple of those plays. I suppose the very first play that we put online before the storm was about a young couple deciding whether to be a couple in lockdown or not. And then we also had lots of plays actually, a lot of plays which had glimmers of hope in them. So there was the Wonder of You, about the family attending a funeral or not being able to.
So touching, yeah.
Numbers were so small, but there was something hopeful about that. And even the final play as well, Ragnarok, despite all the chaos and destruction of the climate kind of collapsing. So sometime in the near future, there was kind of again a glimmer of hope, with the couple and their plan to have a child. So it was a lot of plays kind of captured that sense of people reassessing their what was important and their priorities, and focusing on what's on their loved ones and on what's important kind of during these times when so much is taken away from us.
It's those first two. I mean, all three of those that you just mentioned were so touching in their what they're trying, the difficulty of intimacy that is presented in this time. I had an aunt pass away early during COVID, and I couldn't fly there to the funeral, and so seeing that piece where they get on top of the car and sing, and it was such a cathartic moment. I just thought that was such a nice touch, and a beautiful little
little
human moment.
Things we've all been through, don't they? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and that shared humanity, and that's been lovely about it. I mean, that the writers. I mean, we had 2 plays in the 10 plays written by American writers, and the fact that we had writers from all around the world, and that somehow there's kind of a connection between us all. It kind of, I suppose, theatre and the arts have the power to connect people and to make us realize we're all in this together, and that there's a shared humanity about these experiences. So I think that's been a lovely part of working on it with everyone.
Right. I mean, short of an alien invasion, it is amazing that the pandemic has forced literally everyone in the world into a similar experience. I because you did worldwide submissions, right? And I'm just curious of like, what was it like getting?
We started them off as kind of an Irish kind of thing. Yeah, and then the final time we had a few people emailing and saying, "Oh, can I'm not Irish, I don't live in Ireland, but can I be part of this?" So we just decided to for the final call out to make it kind of a global call out. So that was lovely, and then lovely to be able to include 2 of the plays. Yeah, for How Janelle Monáe Once Made Me Feel by Julia Marks, and then Bear Hunt by Grace Lobo were both by American writers. And we were talking to all the writers on Zoom anyway, so people could be like with all these Zoom kind of meetings, people can be anywhere in the world to have those meetings. We were rehearsing over Zoom for some of them, when writers weren't able to join us. We had some in-person sort of live rehearsals with people socially distancing and everything, and when the writers weren't able to join us physically in the room, they were there on the screen kind of joining us on Zoom as well. So it was kind of a a mixture of being live and in person, and using technology throughout the development of the plays and throughout the selection of them and the rehearsing of them, as well as the actual way we chose to I suppose to present the plays to the audiences as well.
Right. Yeah. So it's such a great mix, and the variety really shows in the selection that you put together. I just want to remind folks, if you have any questions about the plays or about for Jim or myself, you can drop them on a comment in YouTube, and we can see your question and respond to it here in real time. If not, I'll be delighted to chat with Jim. So Jim, what makes a good tiny play? It's such a specific thing. So I'm just curious, is there a philosophy that Fishamble has come up with?
Yeah. I know. Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because there are a few different people actually credited with that quote. Some people say it was Bernard Shaw, and some people say it was Petrarch, and people, I think, credited Mark Twain with it, where that comment that somebody says, I'm so sorry, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I've written you a long letter instead. And that saying something with brevity and something that kind of, encapsulates things in a short amount of time actually takes more thought and more sort of careful editing. That every word really, really counts if you have fewer of them.
Right.
So I suppose that's what we kind of said to people with it, like in terms of trying to create a really good tiny play. We kind of said to people, look, if you're struggling with the 600 words, if you feel, I really need more words, I need double this, 3 times this long, then maybe the idea just doesn't a tiny play format, and you need to think of a different idea, or write a longer play that isn't a tiny play. So I suppose in a way it's kind of like choosing to write a sonnet or maybe a haiku. If you have one idea that you think you can express clearly, then the tiny play format perhaps works for you. We tend to just feel that plays with maybe 2 people in them, or a small number of people in them, worked well. I mean, there isn't really probably much time in a tiny play to find out about many more characters than maybe 2 or 3,
Right.
And there isn't really room for a subplot. So, you kind of say, like one idea, done really well, is what seem to make a really good tiny play, a really good strong idea, and then that could be expressed fairly succinctly and pack its punch in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I think the pack the punches was a good guideline, perhaps, if you're wanting to create tiny plays. I've done a lot of short film and like the short film festivals, and to me the success of these sort of condensed ones is trying to find one moment, or one big decision that has to happen, or one like dramatic climax. You're not developing over time, right? Like it's more about who are we instantly, and what's the conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. One moment of change, as you say, one turning point, I suppose, one crisis that changes somebody. That's what you're kind of looking for, aren't you? And those moments can be big, major kind of moments, or they could be something very small, and so we kind of like the mixture of that as well with some of the plays, that some of them were, were kind of small moments, some were big, some were kind of intimate family moments, but that had big repercussions. I suppose the mother who needs her son to buy more alcohol for her than he's willing to do so. It's kind of in a way, a domestic thing about buying groceries for people who are quarantining at home. Again, something lots of people went through. And
pandemic drinking.
That brings up also absolutely bad pandemic drinking, and just that invasion of privacy, and people having to suddenly be dependent on others in their family when they wouldn't have in normal circumstances. I think
right.
So the kind of sort of, because the idea is big, even though the way it's presented in the tiny play is like one small intimate exchange.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that moment doesn't get resolved, which I appreciated about it. It's just sort of like, okay, we're gonna go our separate ways. We might have this conversation next week.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
No,
yeah. And then we tried to, we did talk to people about kind of, I suppose about, we're kind of keen to get back into a theatre, even though we couldn't have an audience in the theatre live. The audience was online, but we were kind of keen to get back into a theatre with it. So we made the decision to stage and film 6 of them, obviously, in a theatre, in the O'Reilly Theatre right next door to our office in Dublin. And then the other 4, I suppose, were done before that, when 2 of the plays were on Zoom, Wild Horses, obviously, and Bear Hunt. And then, so we liked the fact that we were doing some plays that were kind of written for the technology that we're all getting used to using, at the moment. And then one that was an audio play with the relationship between the land and the sea and the bird. And then we had a kind of a sort of a one person play with War Paint, where he talks into his phone. So we kind of like that. Perhaps the selection of 10 plays were capturing what was on people's minds, but also capturing the ways that theatre makers and artists and companies around the world have been, trying to make work at this time, trying to employ artists and engage with audiences in different ways. So it kind of captured a little sort of, hints of different ways in which we've all been doing that, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I love the variety of that. And the audio one about the earth and the sea with our friend Pat Kinnavan.
Yes,
it was such a surprise. I was like, oh wow, now it's just footage of nature and these amazing vocal work on those pieces. So it was
Yeah,
such
no,
a
absolutely. Yeah, with Pat Ginnivan, that your audiences will know from Silent last year, and Alwyn Fuere and Mary Murray, also like fantastic
yeah.
actors, yeah, and our the filmmakers we worked with, Jeddah Debris and Calgary, they sent their drone off the west coast of Ireland during rehearsals to film the footage. So
Yeah.
it's all been filmed specifically for the play, and it does
Right.
looks really beautiful.
No, yeah, it was stunning. Here's a question. How long from the YouTube page, how long did it take from when you started getting scripts to when you aired it this past week? What was that process like?
Yeah, good idea. Yeah, so it was kind of, we like to pride ourselves, I suppose, I think sometimes in theatre companies, that theatre is can be a fairly swift, fast moving kind of medium. Now, it does normally take perhaps, 2 years, I suppose, from commissioning a play and developing it to producing it would be kind of, I suppose, a normal time frame. So maybe it's not as quick as we think. But I suppose when there's when there's a moment of crisis like this, you kind of feel, okay, we're a new writing company. We need to respond to this and react to this. And so things can happen fairly quickly, especially because we were having like everyone to postpone other productions and postpone other plans, and things were shifting.
Right.
So we suddenly had the time and the resources to do something perhaps.
Yeah, what else can you do?
Yes, exactly. So we were able to use our funding from the Arts Council and Dublin City Council and our patrons to try and make the work happen fairly quickly. So we invited people to send us the plays kind of around April and May, and we were kind of reading the plays. And then I suppose in kind of end of May, we thought, oh, maybe we'll do something with these. You know what I mean? So we were kind of thinking how we might stage them or do something with them sort of in June. And then we chose the 10 plays. And I suppose we had then once we chose the 10 plays, we had about 2 weeks of script development where we discussed the plays with the writers, and people had a chance to submit a slightly revised rehearsal draft if they wished to do so. And we were casting the plays during that time. And then we spent about a week rehearsing them, and then a couple of days filming them, and then about a week editing them afterwards. So I suppose from the time we actually went into pre-production with them, it was about 4 or 5 weeks from beginning to end, and then a few weeks beforehand of development and choosing the plays and stuff. And that was fun to, we were it was like we had about over 50 people working on the thing. So it was just lovely to work with a big bunch of artists and to be back again, after such a gap. So that was kind of really, really lovely about it over that kind of month or so.
And I'm sure it was so nice for the artist to be working. It just felt great to, hey, let's generate some work, and during this time, and when it's
no, absolutely. I think people really rose to that. Everyone was thrilled to do it. And we worked with some, like all the actors in the plays in the theatres were based in Ireland. Then some of the actors we worked with on the Zoom plays are based elsewhere. It was kind of nice to be able to work with people in different places as well. Which is great. And then 3 of the plays we worked with actors who are in the same household. So I mean, the Before the Storm kind of depends on the kiss at the end. So Kwaku and Jill are a real life couple. So that with the first play, and then the last play also, I suppose, depends on some kind of physical intimacy. So Aaron and Claire are a couple as well, and then the play The Wonder of You, about the family at the funeral, are a kind of a real life mother, father and son as well.
Really?
So
cool.
they were able to be close to each other. So it was kind of fun working that out. How we would do those things, and then the plays, obviously, people had to remain 2 weeks apart, and then finding reasons in rehearsals why the characters would remain apart, as well as the fact that we just had to, as present, we were working on the plays.
Right. Yeah. Here's another question from the chat, and this is something I've been thinking about and proposing, particularly for students who are studying theater right now. Or young professionals who maybe just entered the theater industry. But do you think that this format, the online format, can give hope to drama students who fear there's no future for theater with an audience? Is there a future? It's just different. What does the online platform allow or offer that maybe they didn't have before?
Yeah, I know it's a really great question and a big question, and I don't know if any of us really knows the answer to that.
Sure.
You know, like theatre depends, of course, on the liveness of the performance and the fact that the audience and the actors are in the same room together, experiencing the play or the piece of theatre. So, you know, it's just not the same, I think, really. You know what I mean? Kind of when things are online, it kind of feels at the moment like we're moving things online and thinking laterally about how to do that, because we're involved in a business which is all about creativity and thinking laterally, and we're trying to kind of find ways to connect with people. And it's great to be able to do that. So we really enjoyed being able to do some plays online and to make the work happen in that way. But I suppose it doesn't feel the same. I mean, you do miss the live theatre, you know. So I would hope that we'll get back eventually to that, of course, and maybe there'll be like more online work for a while, you know, or there'll be kind of hybrid kind of work, I suppose, where people, the live audiences might be smaller, but maybe there'll be live streaming, and we'll do that for a while. But I don't think theatre will. I mean, that's the danger is maybe the theatre then starts to feel like it's competing with, you know, with film and television and stuff, and it's not quite the same thing. So I do hope that yeah, that we'll get back to kind of something more like what we've been used to eventually. Sure. I think it is a hard time to be graduating from college and to be entering the theatre industry. Although I've been talking to some, you know, young actors recently, and they were saying, well, you know, they're self-taping, they're learning how to light themselves at home, they're learning how to make work themselves, they're learning how to get
so important right now. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, there's freedom or an empowerment in a way,
right?
And people are developing new skills. But of course, you'd hope that there would be the work, you know, the real, you know, actual work for people to be employed in. As we move forward with as well, you know.
Yeah, there is something egalitarian though about
Fish Amble's point of view.
Oh,
sorry, Rex. I was just thinking of just that from Fish Amble's point of view. You know, like we're looking next at a one-person play where the auditorium has been taken out, and the theatre is set up as kind of a cabaret style theatre, so people can be physically distanced from each other, and hopefully there'll still be a sense of the kind of the buzz of live theatre and the energy of live theatre, because people will be sitting around tables with drinks or whatever, rather than maybe sitting kind of with two rows in between everyone and 3 seats empty on every side of everyone, you know, which maybe feels a bit more miserable. And then we do have a kind of a site-specific show where the play is written in interconnecting monologues, so the actors can be distanced from each other, and because we're in semi-outdoor places, you know, the audiences can be distant from each other, and all of those plays don't have intermissions. They're you know, so there's no issue about people mingling in a foyer and trying to manage people in one way and out the other way. So we're hoping to be back next month, like in kind of, you know, September, October, with live performance, you know, albeit in a scaled back kind of way, but certainly like it feels, yeah, we will get it'll be a while before we're back to plays maybe with large casts on stage, you know, with plays where people need to be close and need to, you know, shout at each other and push each other, all those things that
exactly
plays demand.
No spitting or combat next season.
yeah.
But the thing about the student question, it strikes me, you know, there's something egalitarian about putting up your own material online. You don't need a producer to get on YouTube. You know, like you don't have to wait on being cast in a show in order to create something and get it out there. Now, it might not have as wide of an audience if Fish Amble or Solus Nua or someone else is producing it, but I think it's so important that you regularly flex the muscle of your own craft. And also learning to self-produce is really important, I think, for young artists, for any artist during now and moving forward. So for whoever answered that question, asked that question, I think there's some opportunity to definitely learn new skills, as Jim was saying earlier as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you need to be resilient, don't you, as a theatre artist as well? You need resilience, and this is perhaps, you know, kind of people are certainly developing that skill at the moment.
Yeah. Here's a sort of related question. With some actors doing their own lighting, filming, set design from home, do you think that will help them appreciate the work of production crews when we get back to the live theater? That's a funny question. Yeah, I mean, I would imagine.
Sorry, you just broke up a tiny bit on me.
Oh, did I break up?
I'm sorry about that. Would you mind just?
Saying
that people are doing some design and stuff. Someone
asked. Can you hear me now? Am I coming through now?
Yes, I can. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, great.
You are. Yeah, thank you very much.
Someone asked, with some actors doing their own lighting, filming, set design from home, do you think that that will help them appreciate the work of the production crews when we get back to live theater? Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. I think people are really appreciating kind of the work and the job that people do, and the kind of things we took for granted in a way, perhaps, you know, the kind of work that went into things. So for certainly working on the tiny plays, you know, everything was a challenge, you know. So in terms of sound, you know, we couldn't, because of social distancing, we couldn't use radio mics because that would have involved people getting too close to each other. People were you know, we were from a costuming point of view, we were people weren't able to do costume fittings, taking measurements for costumes. You know, so actors were using their own clothes, working with a costume designer who was providing some costumes for them. But then, you know, the actors had to kind of fit them and try them on themselves, and then props like stage the same prop that the actors had handled. So actors were taking care of their own props, or else they were being kind of sanitized in between being touched and used by different people. So it was like it was just a kind of a huge list of extra things. And we worked with a fantastic team of people. We had an amazing team who made all that work. But I think certainly, like, I think people appreciate what everyone else does beforehand. But if it's increased that sense of appreciation for what everyone's role is and what everyone's job is. You know, and in the film world, you know, like people are, I suppose in theatre, actors often do their own hair and makeup and things, and, you know, but in the film world, you know, like, again, that's kind of problematic because of social distancing. So people are appreciating what goes into a lot of jobs that we perhaps took for granted a bit, or, you know, but now have to rethink, I suppose, and plan differently for.
Yeah. Here's another good question. As a director, did the actors come ready to deliver, or did they start from the beginning and then you build the piece throughout? And they asked, you know, Ellen, is it Ellen or Eileen? I think it's Eileen Walsh, right?
Eileen Walsh, that's right. Yeah.
Eileen Walsh and Bear Hunt, for example. How do you get that tour de force performance, particularly in a, you know, when you're giving direction through Zoom?
Yes, I know. Well, yeah, no, it is challenging. And Eileen is obviously, you know, she's such a fantastic actor. You know, so as all the actors were, it was great to work with them all. You know, there were particular challenges to that. I think, you know, sometimes when you're in a rehearsal room and you're directing, you can give general notes to people. Sometimes you're giving specific notes, or you're having discussions with an actor about a part. You might be having a kind of a, you know, a quiet word with an actor out, you know, the way a scene is working. So the kind of the subtlety of all that kind of goes out of it when you're on Zoom and everyone is privy to the same conversation, and you don't really have eye contact with people. You know, you're kind of, you see people, but you're not, you're missing out on sometimes on the body language and eye contact and all those kind of ways of communicating that, you know, as well as the words we say. So it can be challenging. I mean, on tiny plays 24/7, that wasn't really a challenge. It was, you know, they were great people to work with, and people came with lots of ideas and thoughts. Anyway, I mean, for the plays that we did live, we did Zoom rehearsals for every play. We did kind of an hour and a half or 2 hours on every play on Zoom with each of the playwrights to just talk through the play and get a sense of it and make sure everyone was on the same wavelength. And then the actors did go away and do some work, and some people learned their lines and some people just thought more about the character. And then we tended to come back and have a second rehearsal. If feasible, they were live rehearsals. So we would have a kind of in a rehearsal room with social distancing in place. We had one live rehearsal for each play, and then we filmed it in the theatre, basically. And there was maybe there were a few days in between each of those rehearsals, so the actors were doing some work on their own, you know, learning lines and preparing them. You know, for the plays that were on Zoom, we just rehearsed on Zoom, you know, a couple of times, and then went straight into recording it. And we had, you know, fantastic people, obviously, doing those plays. So it was, you know, it was very, it was easy to direct them. Certainly, it was a slightly bizarre thing on Zoom plays that Zoom doesn't quite know. If you're on speaker view, Zoom doesn't know when you're going to speak. You know, they don't see the microphone, and the camera doesn't know you're about to speak until you have spoken. So, you know, in a Zoom meeting, you often miss the first word of what somebody is saying, or you don't see them on the screen until they're on word 2 or 3 of what they're saying. So that didn't really work for the plays. So a couple of takes of those Zoom plays where the actors all said hello before every line, so that Zoom would turn the camera onto them and put them on speaker view, and then they would say their line. So there were some slightly bizarre things we had to do to make those work. And the actors that were
that's a great. Yeah, that's a super smart hack to get the technology to work for you.
Yeah, just to make the technology work for you. And Zoom also doesn't like when people overlap when they speak, as we all do all the time when we're speaking. So it would favor one person, and so there was some lines in Wild Horses where the characters were overlapping, but actually Zoom couldn't pick that up. So we had to structure it so that the actors were not quite overlapping as much as they might have done if the play was live in a theater. So lots of technical things to work out, but it was it was fun to have.
Yeah, and we've been doing these digital play workshops, which have all been on Zoom. And one of the things I miss the most actually is the breaks in between working, because that's when, theater is the collaborative, maybe the most collaborative of the art forms. And getting to know an ensemble is sometimes when you're relaxed and you're not, in your script and marking it up and when you're at the water cooler, if you will. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. You do miss all those little, more, informal kind of moments and exchanges, don't you? Which is a real shame. And we had to structure rehearsals so that the actors wouldn't overlap, and we would have time in between each play to clean the room and get things ready for the next group of actors, and trying to make sure people didn't overlap and didn't meet each other, and that we didn't need coffee breaks because rehearsal sessions were short enough. So it felt very antisocial, and counterintuitive, really. But I mean, that's the way at the moment, I suppose.
Right. But with the little self-contained pieces that tiny plays are, you can at least do one chapter, exactly. Move on to the next. Yeah.
They did lend themselves to being able to compartmentalize, I suppose, in terms of how we managed all that.
Right. Here's another question. Of the 500 plays you received, are there more that you'd like to produce in the near future? Or will we see more tiny plays?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, we'd love to produce more than just 10. So what we did was each week we shared some plays, maybe about a half dozen plays on the website. So on the website, there are actually 35 of the plays that were submitted to us out of the 500. Up on fishamble.com. So, people might like to read some more plays, certainly up there. And any of those could have been produced. I suppose we just were trying to ultimately do the ones we thought we could give do as well as possible. Give the best that might work best with the resources that we had and the challenges that we're facing at the moment. So we'd love to have done some more, but at the moment they're the 10. Really, we're not planning to do any more. But there are others on the website that people can read if they wish to do so. And they're great fun to read.
Another sort of development question of, are there plays that you could see evolving into full length plays, or are they really not?
That's a very good question, actually. Yeah. So having said to people, keep it, make sure it's complete and self-contained, and it's not a scene from a bigger play, and it really is, a tiny play that, is complete in itself and has one thing to say and does so really succinctly. Then you think, oh, actually, maybe that could be the springboard for a bigger piece of work. Uh-huh. As has happened before, when we did tiny plays a few years back, one of the tiny plays developed into a bigger play by Deirdre Kinahan that your audience will be familiar with as well. A little tiny play called Broken, and then she developed it into a full-length play called Spinning.
Spinning, absolutely. Great.
Yeah, Spinning came out of a tiny play.
Yeah. I didn't realize it was from a tiny play. That's really great.
That was about a father trying to pick up his children at a school, and the school principal came out, and there had been a barring order placed against the father of the children. So the school principal had to refuse the man permission to pick up his children in school. And that became the starting point for a bigger play. And Colin Murphy wrote a tiny play about the Irish government's decision to guarantee our banks. And that became a kind of a big verbatim kind of piece of journalistic theatre called Guaranteed, which was made into a film. So things have in the past kind of grown from that, and by Sebastian Barry called The Pride of Parnell Street, that grew out of a very small, short monologue that we commissioned him to write for an Amnesty International campaign, drawing attention to domestic violence. And that then also grew into something bigger. So it does certainly happen. So I don't know, perhaps one of these tiny plays might develop into something bigger,
That's great. And it's so nice that it's so cool that you get to know so many writers through this process. And other people who might not have typically been identified as a playwright, but they have an idea for it.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people think, well, I've kind of thought I might write a play for a while. Fish Amble was looking for something really short. I should have a go at that and see how I get on. So it encourages new writers. It encourages people to think, quite succinctly sometimes, which people often enjoy. It allows us to have discussions with lots of writers, as you say, and people often send us plays and we just don't have the resources perhaps to do the play, even though we might really like it. But we say, look, please keep this, call out for submissions in mind. And it's a way for us to work with lots of writers whose work we admire, but we just don't have the space to kind of to produce maybe a full-length play by that person, So it's been great for us as a way of developing relationships with writers, certainly.
Yeah. Someone else asked, are you creating any plays for audio only? In other words, radio plays or radio visual plays, like the one, the sea, the earth, the bird one. Are there other things in the work?
Yeah, we don't really. I mean, we are looking at there are 1 or 2 plays we have done that we are looking at kind of possible audio versions of. You know what I mean? Especially at the moment when it's more challenging to kind of be in theatres. But of course, not every play suits that either. But we are looking at a couple of possibilities for that at the moment. And the play, that play Change with the land and the sea and the bird was a great opportunity to do something that was kind of like an audio play with film footage very much a part of it as well. So it's interesting just how you might use different mediums in different ways, I suppose. To try and create work at the moment. I think we'll probably try for the next while to get back into theatres, and if that means looking at one-person plays, obviously the work that we came to by Pat Kinnavan that we were in DC with last year with Solis Nua, we're looking at getting back into theatres, touring his plays again. They're one-man shows. The audience capacity will be limited, obviously, with all the social distancing and restrictions in place, but we figure we can make them work. So we're kind of hoping to be back in theatres now after this, and possibly streaming work, but presenting it live as well, rather than maybe keeping doing kind of online kind of projects. But we'll see. I suppose it's hard to know how long things will go on for like this, and how hard it'll be to get back into theatres. We might well be looking at more online projects than we have currently planned.
Yeah, I wonder. I've been thinking a lot about this, particularly because we're going to be producing a full production of a digital piece this fall, and maybe more. And we've done 2 workshops now, and I've just been thinking about what makes it theater when it's digital. What is the element that makes it live, what makes it theater, as opposed to a web series or an art film. I wonder if, as another director and artistic director, how have you been thinking in that, wrestling with that aspect?
Yeah, I suppose there's something, isn't there, about the involvement of the audience, that the audience affects what the performers are doing. I suppose it makes something theatrical. Like you go to a cinema and you see a film and you think, well, Tom Cruise is never going to change his performance based on how an audience reacts, whereas the actors in a play will respond, and what the audience sees will be different because the audience is there. So the fact that it's live and that the audience plays a kind of a key crucial part in that evening's theatre, I suppose, is what really makes it theatrical. So I suppose it was it's kind of tricky kind of doing work where the audience is removed from that, or where the audience is a digital audience, kind of, and not part of that. So I suppose for us with the tiny plays, we were kind of keen that we would do the plays in a theatre, that they wouldn't look like short films, which would be something else again, that they were written for theatre, that they and we chose to show, to map out the floor with 1 meter squares, so everyone knew kind of how far apart they could be, to kind of try and build that into the kind of the whole look of the thing.
Right. That was a nice design touch.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Marie Kearns, our designer, had some great thoughts on that, really, And we let, people were kind of saying, we move the ladders from the scene dock, whatever, to get them out of the way because they might be seen in the background. And we said, no, let's leave things there. Let's see the lights. Let's see the curtains. Let's see, the kind of the telescope and various kind of pieces of equipment, and just celebrate being in a theatre, so that the audience can feel they're part of a kind of a theatrical kind of event in a way. But it's not the same, of course, as the audience having a direct impact on what on what they see and on what the performance is like. You know what I mean? So I think some way of getting back to that. And some of the work you're talking about, Rex, doing in a digital way sounds like it's kind of really, sort of exploring that kind of relationship between the audience and the actors in a really interesting way.
The shows that we're developing, the audience it'll be interactive. And so maybe using the chat function, and audiences can control narrative sometimes. Other times another piece that we're developing had audience members turning on their camera and suddenly they're thrust on stage. So it's like leaning into the audience participation, I think, is an interesting way that you can make digital theater feel more theatrical, make it feel like, oh, you really do need me as an audience member to move the story forward. We've been playing with that to I think some great success in the workshop in the 2 workshops we've done. So I'm looking forward to keeping on playing with that. It's been a good experiment so far. I thought, I love that you filmed it on a theater though, and one piece that really stood out to me of how theatrical in its design was the piece with the 3 women and the dancing and the silhouettes and the pink and the blue lights. That was so stunning. It was so tastefully. I hadn't seen theatrical lighting in so long that I was like, oh, there it is.
No, I know. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's something about the theatrical lighting that kind of was really special. Yeah, John Gunning, our light designer, did a great job on that, really, and it was
beautiful.
Even at the end of plays, do we fade the lights on stage, or do, and the people filming the plays are saying, oh, well, we can do that obviously in post-production. So we kind of went with a mixture, like sometimes the actual stage lights faded. As you say, that play, the for how Janelle Monáe once made me feel play was great fun to do, and to use the psychorama and to have different color washes and using silhouettes and very sort of self-consciously being theatrical and celebrating the sort of the theatricality of it, really, because I think it's like theater, and it's so different. I mean, there are so many similarities, but so different to television and film and stuff. And I think it would be a shame to have to start kind of, merging things too much and losing kind of what's unique about each art form, really,
Right, but it's an interesting language though when you use theatrical lighting specifically, I think, to create, like in a film, so often the lighting is trying to capture realistic lighting, and like where's the sun and like where is the light and the cinematography of it. But with maybe a thing to explore is the theatricality of this moment of digital theater. You can do, I don't know, like if my room suddenly lit up in a hot pink thing, that would instantly take us to an emotionally different place. And like, about the theatrical language that we use in the theater of storytelling of, well, the light shifted, so we're in a new place. That would be to explore in a digital piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Someone else asked, Rex, are you talking about the Being Here play, what you're working on? Yes. So we're currently developing 2 or 3 different workshops for digital pieces. One of them is Being Here. That's created by John King and myself. And we had a workshop last week with Jeremy Keith Hunter and John King writing a couple more plays. And the intention with that was for them to co-write one piece, but those 2 writers and they're such great theater makers that at the end of the week, we really had 2 plays. So right now we're developing 3 digital pieces that we are working on for this season. So Being Here is one of them. We had postponed that earlier in June and hope to get back to that as well as these additional pieces in our season. Someone asked, or just noticed the beauty of digital were the close-ups as opposed to miles away in the balcony. That is a nice thing that you can get with digital theater, right? You can really get the cinematic close-ups, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, there are benefits certainly, aren't there? That the audience can be up close with people. Certainly. Yeah. Yeah, I
Like in
noticed when the kind of
war paint.
the old
I
Vic
thought
is
that
kind of
was.
streaming work, aren't they?
Oh,
And they're
sorry.
selling tickets at the same prices, usually the same price structure as if you were going to see a play in the old Vic. But everyone gets the same view because you're at home watching the play, and you're seeing kind of the close-ups. So it is yeah.
Right.
So for the price of a cheap ticket, you can be you can feel like you're sitting in a more expensive seat, perhaps.
That's right. Well, maybe we shouldn't be charging as cheap for digital pieces.
Yes,
They
indeed.
would boost those. These are all front row seats, folks.
Yes.
I'm curious. Like you had your work cut out for you selecting, which plays. If you over 500 pieces, what made what was the difficult decision process like of saying, all right, we're going to choose these for the presentation online?
Oh yeah, it was very tricky really because we'd love to have done so many more of them, and of course you
Yeah.
get the shortlist down to like choosing 35 out of the 500 or so to share on the website was really tricky, and everyone we had a panel of people, and my colleagues and myself in Fishamble kind of then read the plays and and made the decision towards the end. So it was yeah, it was kind of and I suppose so Eva, our producer, and then Chandrika, who's our marketing and development person, and Gavin, our literary manager, and Ronan, our production coordinator, kind of all had our own favorites, and then ultimately we had to kind of decide which ones would make most sense for people to read, perhaps. And then when we were choosing the 10 to perform, we were thinking, well, what would go together as a kind of a really good production, even though the plays aren't linked in any way. What do we think would work together in a as a selection of 10 plays that you'd be curating into something. So we definitely lost lots of plays we'd love to have done that we just felt maybe didn't fit in as well, or we felt maybe two plays were dealing with something similar, so we didn't want two plays to have the similar subject matter, or we felt that some plays maybe depended on a lack of social distancing in a way that we couldn't quite manage. So it was a mixture of kind of logistical things and an artistic decision based on what plays captured the moment most. And then what we did then, I suppose, in terms of putting them all together, we did kind of put them in an order, kind of the order in which they were submitted to us loosely, but also kind of with an eye to kind of the order, the plays kind of being in order of what was on people's minds at certain times during the lockdown. So going from the initial sort of shock of the country going into lockdown, and then people gradually kind of having to do kind of meetings on Zoom, kind of the whole notion of etiquette and behaving inappropriately in a Zoom call or whatever.
Yeah, that was a great piece. It was so funny.
Yeah, very funny. Yeah, really, really clever. And then the plays about people having to get other family members to do their shopping for them. So we kind of tried to put them in order as those issues became kind of hotly debated topics. And
all the way through the end of the world.
And to bring us through to the end of the world with a little glimmer of hope, hopefully at the end.
Yes.
So there was kind of a sense of that as well, that there would be kind of a shape, and then trying to think about how we might kind of take the audience by surprise and have enough variety in it. So thinking about the kind of audio play with the film footage, the Zoom plays, the play kind of the play with the drag artist sort of talking directly to his phone, and then the plays that were in a more traditional kind of theatrical format, trying to mix those up so people were taken by surprise, but that it felt satisfying to go through the kind of the journey of the 10 plays. So I suppose all those decisions came into it when we were actually picking the 10 we'd produce, and kind of being aware of, we liked the fact that there were, some writers from outside Ireland, that there was a wide age range in the writers, that there was a mixture of male and female writers, just looking at the kind of trying to represent a cross section of viewpoints as well. So all those kind of questions became part of the final decision, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just sort of piggybacking on that. I'm curious, because you directed most of these, right?
I directed them all, actually.
You directed them all. That's right. I'm just curious, sort of, what is the, what did you want to leave the audience with? And as it's harder to sort of, when you direct something that is small little vignettes, to quite know what is the full journey. Although I loved how you just described that you went through sort of a timeline with these pieces. but I'm just sort of curious of, what is the catharsis? What is the element that you really want to leave the audience with at the end of Tiny Plays?
Yeah, I suppose we didn't want to shy away from the darker issues, and so I mean we kind of felt maybe Ragnarok about the end of the world was kind of a bleak one, maybe to leave people on, but also it was kind of philosophical and asking questions and giving us a little bit of hope at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose then it began that we had the plays begin with a play with a couple at the beginning of the lockdown and then end with a couple at the end of the world. This felt like something kind of cyclical or nicely bookended by that. We also were able to kind of do a little shot where we panned out from the couple at the end and then the curtains closed on the stage, and there was a sense
love that effect. Yeah,
kind of a theatrical sort of sense of it coming to a complete end point. So I think you kind of you're hoping that people will take each one on its own merits, but also have their favorites and have their argue over which ones kind of spoke to them most, and we've been really interested in that people with different backgrounds and experiences and people in different age brackets themselves have all responded differently to different ones and found they've connected more with certain ones, and that's been really interesting, kind of those discussions after as well, And I think that's one of the things when we did the Tiny Plays before in a theatre, they sparked off lots of discussion among an audience, and we missed that. We missed the buzz of people kind of in the theatre afterwards talking about it and discussing it and comparing notes with their friends, and hopefully that's going on and kind of in homes and with people watching it or online or people
in the comments section.
So this is lovely to in a way have the questions from people and be able to kind of do that in a way. When we did our previous Tiny Plays, we went through a 24-hour cycle with them. So we started off with the plays that happened first thing in the morning, and then we went through the plays that happened in offices and in schools, and then plays that happened in the evening at home in the evenings, and then into nighttime and into dusk really, at the end of it all. So it was kind of a 24-hour cycle to the Tiny Plays, which again brought people through a kind of a day in the life of Ireland in some way. So we didn't quite do it with these, but we did take people, we kind of tried to sort of put them in an order that took people through the few months from March up until recently, I suppose June or July, just before we were starting to.
It strikes me that, if you did this project, even now, if you started it now, the tone of the plays might be drastically different. Someone asked, or they noticed that they said there wasn't a lot of anger in the plays. Is that because they were submitted earlier in the pandemic? It's an emotion that they hear people admitting to now. I mean, we're over the shock of the pandemic, and now it's like we're still dealing with this.
So, yeah, no, absolutely.
Was there a tone that you felt like was prevalent in the pieces?
Yeah. No, it's really interesting, isn't it? Yeah. I think that it's I think there's anger underneath a lot of the plays, but I suppose the writers have found really interesting ways of finding the humor and the humanity, even though there's anger underneath. I think there's the first play with the young couple, they're kind of frustrated at what's going on. I think there's in Wild Horses, there's the Zoom play with the HR team coming in. There's kind of a frustration at the way companies expected so much of people, and people to be kind of working kind of and checking their emails all the time, and even the wonder of it's so heartwarming. Like at the funeral, there's kind of a frustration that there's such a tiny number of people can attend a funeral, and there's somebody who's passed away is kind of missing that send-off that they deserve and are entitled to, and people would love to give them. So it's kind of an anger underneath some of the plays, I think, even though the way that the writers found to express that perhaps has kind of more humanity or humor or complexity to it, But I think you're right. Maybe the plays would be different at a different tone, and we're kind of at a different stage to you guys, I suppose, in the US as well, that we've kind of come through our lockdown, and we actually are getting back to not back to where we were, but we're kind of the numbers have been good, and we're hoping to kind of so we're kind of getting back to life, albeit wearing masks and keeping distant and having a certain number of people indoors at a time. So it's certainly not like it was, but we're kind of so maybe there's kind of slightly less anger because of because of that. I think the play, the Bear Hunt play with Eileen Walsh and Desiree Birch, is again has a lot of kind of, I think a lot of anger, there's a lightness of touch as well, doesn't it? You know what I mean? That sentimental your family,
with the
and
teddy bear getting hung,
the teddy bear's getting strangled and suffocating and trapped.
Exactly. Yeah. No, yeah, it was that those feelings of isolation were so prevalent throughout. But yeah, I suppose if you're writing a piece, you're just really careful of also just what you put into the world as an artist, and does the world really need another hand grenade right now? As a I think a lot of times our job as artists is to, without shying away from the dark aspects of humanity, but to find the full scope of humanity. And offer that little bit of hope even when it's dark. Which is, it's hard to be called non-essential, right? Like when businesses are shut down, and like you said, the theater in the United States is definitely going to be shut down for much longer. When I found out you all were going to be rehearsing and doing a show in an actual theater building this fall, I was so jealous and angry. I was just like, oh, why? Why can't we get our act together? But ultimately, I the essential part of the arts, right, is that we're gonna hopefully offer some people solace and hope and entertainment and a laugh and get through this together.
Yeah, I think it's been a real there's been a sense that here, certainly, there's been a very, the National Campaign for the Arts in Ireland has done a really, really good job of that, I think. And there's been kind of a sense, I think, in general, it seems to be that people are suddenly realizing, God, if there isn't any theatre, and if there are no concerts, and if there are no live music gigs, and if we can't go to to bookshops and buy books and and all that, then life would be very, very dull, and uninteresting without the arts, and realizing how wide and the arts are, and how much they affect us all, and enhance our lives. So there's been a real appreciation, actually, kind of in Ireland, certainly, and maybe elsewhere, hopefully, among people who maybe didn't think that way, that the arts are really valuable and need to be protected and kept alive and stuff. So hopefully that's I suppose a good thing perhaps to come out of it, that people realize that we can't not have these in our lives,
Right. Yeah. And it's always compared to the dire needs of, like, some people need ventilators, some people need emergency, health care right now. And like, they should get it. I hope they have it, and let's fund all of that. But for most of us, we need the arts. We need to not go crazy. And we need some we need a bit of beauty in our lives, so that we don't lose our minds, because
absolutely, it's part of people's mental health as well, isn't it? That's important. Absolutely.
So that's a great closing thought for us, is how can we as artists, because how can we as artists, for ourselves and for our communities, help understand the essential nature of what the arts provide? Because I often think artists are sometimes the worst at valuing themselves. Of you like, well, I'm not a doctor, I just act in plays or whatever that is. And it's like, well, we need doctors, but we also need writers and musicians, and we need everyone.
Absolutely. It's the rich tapestry of life, isn't it? Really, they're all necessary in different ways. I suppose even from an economic point of view, what's kind of often people don't realize that the arts generate so much income in a community, and so many so many aspects of our economy are generated and kept alive by the arts. Usually, if you go to a play or a concert, then you're parking a car, you're getting a meal, there's lots of money going around in the economy through all those things. So I suppose there's a real sense that I mean, certainly the subsidy that goes into the arts in Ireland, comes back to the government through taxes and other revenues, all the time. So, you can, and there are all kinds of economic reports sort of to back that up. So you can give money to the arts, you can get more money back, and you can then use that extra money you get to pay for hospital beds and for teachers, which are all best result. But it doesn't have to be a choice between one or the other, I suppose.
Yeah, it's not a choice between one or the other. That's right. It's not a false, that sets up this false dichotomy of we're competing.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, we can all, there's enough pie for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's get our slice of pie. Well, Jim, this is so fantastic, just so great to catch up with you and to
it really is, Rex. Thank you so much.
Fish Amble's work and hear more from you. And so I know you said that Fish Amble's doing some live performance next, but is there anything else coming up online that folks can tune into?
We don't have anything planned online for the moment, actually. So it'll be some live performances in Dublin and touring around Ireland, but hopefully at some stage kind of continuing to tour outside Ireland and hopefully back to DC at some stage when we're all back to do that again.
Yeah, I look forward to when we can bring you and then another Fish Amble show back to DC.
No, absolutely, and we will be streaming some work actually and looking at kind of sharing some work online. But we've nothing announced yet. But people can keep an eye on fishamble.com, and you're very good, obviously, at sharing kind of thoughts and news with your audiences as well. So it's worth keeping an eye on that if people are interested in following some of the work we're up to.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again for sharing it. For us, for Solus Nua, we have some upcoming events that you can check out digitally. We have two visual art exhibits that are happening right now. You can find that on the website, solusnua.org. One of them is co-hosted with American University. It's also on American University's site. You can tour the exhibit virtually. And then we have a literary event coming up later in August, which is co-hosted with Politics and Prose and the Irish Embassy, featuring Dublin Voices, so another Dublin writer coming up. And then, as I mentioned earlier, this October, we haven't announced our full dates yet, but we will have a fully produced digital theater production, and I am so excited about what the artists have been creating. I mentioned earlier, we paired an African-American writer and an Irish writer to co-create this piece. And it's really centered around what is intimacy and what is bridging cultures in a time of social distance and in a time of digital age. So we're really excited to explore what all of that looks like. Hope you tune in, and thanks again for everyone joining us. And Jim, it's just such a fantastic treat to have you.
Oh yeah, thanks so much, Rex, and thanks to everyone at Solus Nua. It's always a pleasure, and thanks so much to your audiences as well for joining us for this chat. Really lovely to talk to you.
Brilliant. I'm going to end the live stream here, and then we can chat for a second longer. But bye, everybody. Great. Hope to talk to you soon.
Bye. Thank you.